Hi, I'm Andrea. Thanks for joining me for this 30-minute yoga practice. This is one of those days where a chair would be a very good idea, in my humble opinion. So I would pull a chair into the mix, and then the rest of the props are kind of our usual suspects. If you're new, welcome. None of these are mandatory. You can do this without props, but it is really useful to have a folded blanket. It could be a beach towel to sit on a little bit later and for other things sometimes. Also a couple of blocks. If you don't have blocks, then thick books will do. Those are helpful tools too, in addition to the chair I mentioned. And you can see that I'm standing on a yoga mat. If you don't have one, just find a place maybe that's carpeted and it's not too slick, and you're gonna be just fine. I do happen to be barefoot. If you're uncomfortable being barefoot, keep your shoes on. And I think it's probably best for you to locate what would be the front of your mat, so maybe you have one, facing me, so you can best see me. I'll move myself around so that you can best view the poses. You don't have to worry about moving. We'll start, as we almost always do, in the bedrock of all poses, our mountain pose, with your feet hip distance apart, a soft bend in your knees. Feel your mountain, feet into the earth, crown of your head, the peak of your mountain to the sky, maybe into the heavens. Turn your palms away from one another. Let that happen at the shoulder joint so there's an uplift to your heart. It's a soft gaze. Really, the gaze is ultimately inward instead of distractedly outward. And it's here in the majesty of our mountain that we stop so that we can start. Find your breath and see if you can let your breath be just through your nose. Both the inhale and eventually the exhale too. Mostly what I'd like is for you to be aware of your breathing. Notice if it gets short or choppy. See if you can drop back in to a rhythmic rise and fall. Last few moments here. We'll add on. Inhale, arms out and up, thumbs to the sky, a V shape overhead. And then exhale, float your arms along your sides, palms face out. Once more, inhale, arms out and up, thumbs to the sky. And then float your arms alongside your body. Take your hands onto your hips. Now shift your weight onto your left foot. And as you do, hug that left hip into a midline so it doesn't become like we're hanging out at the supermarket, you know? You're gonna hug that left hip in, and then take your right leg out in front of you with all your toes facing the sky. This is the first time where you may want a hand on the back of the chair. I think it's a great idea. Now keep that outer left hip hugging in. Keep your right hand on your hip and turn your toes to face out towards the right and nerd out a little bit with me, won't you? You're feeling that happen at the hip joint. And then go back toes to the sky. Keep hugging that left hip in, turn your right toes to the side, feel it happening at your hip joint, like we're dancing a jig together, and turn your toes up to the sky. Once more with a little feeling, turn the right toes out, feel that happen at the hip joint, stay here for a moment, hug that left hip in even more, stand tall like we're still a mountain as we dance a jig, and then turn your toes to the sky and step your feet hip distance. Palms face out, little soft bend in our knees. We'll take a break in between sides with something different. A chair pose. Bend your knees, thumbs to the sky. Your weight goes into your heels. And then stand and float the arms alongside you. Again, bend your knees, thumbs to the sky, a V shape. Stand and float the arms alongside you. 2 more times like that. Bend your knees like you're sitting into a tiny chair behind you. And then float your arms alongside you. See if we can link the inhale as we sit in our chair. Exhale, stand it back up and pause. I'm going to move my chair, you don't need to, but I want you to be able to see me, and I want to be able to show you how you were likely going to use the chair for our second side. I'm also coming off my mat. You don't have to do that either. We'll stand hip distance. Now it's the right hip that hugs in, and our left hand on our left hip. I'm keeping my hand on the back of the chair. Just makes life a little easier. Why not, right? Now as we shift the weight onto the right foot, we want to keep the due diligence of our right hip hugging in, and then left toes to the sky. Left hand can feel what's happening in the hip. Turn your toes to the left, let that happen at your hip joint, and then turn those toes straight up. Keep hugging, right hip in. Turn your left toes over to the left, and then back up to the sky. We're still standing tall. We're mountains as we dance our jig. One more time. Turn those toes out to the left. Keep hugging your right hip in. Feel the majesty of your mountain and your breath. 2 moments. Turn your toes to the sky. Step your feet hip distance. Return to your mountain. We'll step out wide on our mat. I'm going to do the movement of my chair again. You don't need to. And as we step out wide, actually we're not going to be wide. We're going to step out to the wide edge of your mat. I'm going to turn and face you so that you can see me more easily. You can just be facing that long edge of your mat, or if you don't have one, pretend. And from here, we're going to dance our jig again, but carefully because we don't have the balance of the chair. And you can always bring it into the mix if you want to. So instead of dancing a jig, we're going to hug that left hip in and make a kickstand out of our right foot. So the ball of my foot is on the ground and my right heel is on my ankle, and I've got that standing leg, that left leg, the hip is hugging in. You don't have to go any further than this. All I ask is that you nerd out on the jig that we were dancing in a slightly different form. Maybe your foot comes up towards the calf. Eventually, possibly, totally not important, your right foot can go into your left inner thigh. And it could be that you grow the branches of your tree out to the side, thumbs to the sky. So you could do the out to the side, thumbs to the sky with a kickstand going on. Maybe even V-shape overhead like when we were in our chair pose. You do you. There will be wobbles, little breezes in our trees. 2 moments. Bring your hands to your hips. Turn your knee or foot forward and then step hip distance. Remember, we're wide here. Carrying on, arms out to the side, thumbs to the sky. Now we do, in fact, step wide as we face the wide edge of our mat, the long edge of our mat. And it's kind of measured as ankles underneath wrists. At least that's a good starting point for most of us. Remember, moments ago, when we did our tree and also when we danced our jig, we nerded out on the hip. Turn your right leg out, like you're dancing a jig from your right hip again, and let that right foot face the short edge of your mat. And then cheat your back heel, your left heel, about 45 degrees at an angle. Bend your front knee, and then just make sure that you've got a straight line from your knee to your ankle. So sometimes that means a little bit wider stance. Thumbs to the sky, V-shape will straighten the front leg. We'll just do a couple dynamics here. Bend your front knee into your warrior pose. Inhale, arms overhead in a V-shape, front leg straightens. Exhale, into your warrior pose. Once more like that, V-shape, thumbs to the sky, front leg is straight. And then we'll settle in to the front knee being bent. And follow me here. It's actually trying to do a tree pose or dance a jig still. Now, if it's too much on your arms, feel free to lower your arms or even bring your hands to your hips anytime. While we're here, feel your foundation. Your foundation is your breath. It's also your right heel stamping into your mat. Your right hip is hugging underneath your body as if it's trying to make its way to your left toe. That's the tree pose we just did happening. And then we'll take our right forearm across our right thigh, left thumb to the sky. We don't collapse, we still have the majesty of our mountain with us. Your right hip is hugging underneath you. That left thumb is to the sky. And if you give a little oomph of a karate chop into your right arm, you can make so much space happen between your shoulders and your ears. Feel like you're spinning the inner upper arms away from one another. That too will give you a little bit of space. And there's a little encouragement with your right forearm to make tree pose or dancing a jig happen in that right hip. Come upright, thumbs to the sky. We're in our warrior pose, and then lower your arms and straighten your front leg. Turn all of your toes to face that long edge of your mat. From your left hip, as if we were dancing a jig. Actually, wait, hold on. That's the joy of live classes. Heel toe so that we're back in our mountain. We got a little business to do before that second warrior. I'll turn and face you so that you can see me a little bit better. Hands on your hips. And then instead of dancing a jig, as we shift our weight onto our right foot, we hug the hip in and we make a kickstand with the left toes on the ground and the left heel against the right ankle. And this is probably great just to stay here. You can employ your chair if you want to here, but maybe you just keep it freestanding and you don't need to venture further than this time. Foot on the calf, perhaps. Foot into the inner thigh, maybe. If it is enjoyable, grow your branches out to the side, thumbs to the sky. Maybe do a V shape overhead at some point in time, but really pay attention to the trunk of your tree. So that right hip hugging in. Nerd out a little bit that left leg in a moment will be a warrior two that I almost did too early. 2 moments. And then hands onto your hips. Turn your left knee forward. Step your feet hip distance. We return to our mountain, and it is our mountain that is facing the long edge of our mat. Thumbs to the sky, arms out wide. We use that as a little bit of a measure to stand wide. And now I actually do mean it. Turn your left leg out like we're dancing our jig. Cheat your left heel at a 45-degree angle. And then we'll just try it on for size. Bend your front knee. And then straighten your arms and your front leg. So V-shaped thumbs to the sky. Exhale into your warrior. Inhale, straighten your front leg, thumbs to the sky, V-shape. Exhale into your warrior. Inhale, thumbs to the sky, V-shape, straight front leg, and now we settle in. So as you bend that front knee, we feel a little evidence of dancing a jig in that left hip. A little evidence of a tree pose in that left hip. If it's too much on your arms, and sometimes by side too, you feel like you've been growing your branches for a very long time, then feel free to lower your arms or bring your hands to your hips here. Let's stamp into the left heel. Let's feel as though that left hip is trying to get to our right toes, like we're dancing our jig and doing our tree pose. 2 moments here. And then forearm, left forearm across the thigh, right thumb to the sky, a karate chop, so that there's oomph enough that we don't collapse. We want to think of making it spacious. Left hip is still doing tree pose. Breath is steady. A couple moments of silent meditation here. We come out of it with the same awareness we went into it. So first we come upright into our warrior pose, thumbs to the sky. Lower your arms, straighten your front leg. Turn all of your toes to face that long edge of your mat. And then heel toe, until your feet are hip distance apart. And then you can feel free to move about the cabin. And we'll make our way to the front edge of our mat. And this is where I think using the chair is going to be of particular importance. I like to use the seat of my chair. There could be a couple of you who use your blocks for this part. So mindful movement of props, just like we have mindful movement getting in and out of poses. Your blocks would go on either side of your mat, not right underneath your feet. And if you decide to use your blocks, I want you to promise me that you're not going to let your head get lower than your hips. That's true for all of us, but that will be trickier if you're trying to use, or you've decided to use blocks here. Now think about our jig. Stand with your feet hip distance. Have the chair within reach in front of you. Shift your weight onto your left foot like we did when we danced our jig at the very beginning. And then begin to bend that left knee, and with your hand on your chair, very carefully, cross your right ankle on top of that left thigh. It doesn't have to go any further than this. It's sort of like a little bit of a hybrid of our chair pose that we did and the tree pose that we did. It's a figure 4. So as you curl those right toes back, be content to stay here and really hug that left hip in, that standing leg. Maybe, possibly, one hand onto the seat of your chair, maybe both hands onto the seat of your chair. It's going to increase the stretch that you're feeling, isn't it? Now just remember our promise. You're not going to let your head get any lower than your hips. If there are those among us who put your hands on blocks here, I want you to be very cautious. It's not about trying to push things too far. It's about the integrity of doing things with awareness, where the porridge is just right. We'll let this steep for a few moments. You can always come out of it early if you need to or want to. 2 silent moments. And remember, we come out of things with the same awareness we go in. So one hand on the back of the chair, firm through your belly as you come upright, point that right knee forward, and then step hip distance and find your mountain. Quite a bit of stretch, wouldn't you say? I will leave my chair where it is this time. I think you can see me just fine. And then we'll bend both knees and shift our weight onto our right foot, and we have that right hip hugging in, so we're not letting it collapse out to the side. With a hand on the back of the chair, maneuver carefully, that dancing of a jig action in the hip, and left ankle on top of right thigh. It doesn't have to go any further than this. This is a very intense pose, I think. So make sure that you curl back the toes. We're not floppy ankling it. I have to remind myself to hug that right hip in. Maybe you do too. Perhaps you venture one hand onto the seat of the chair, and you're going to immediately feel that the stretch gets to be more. We're not chasing more. We're finding porridge is just right. Could be that both hands go on the chair. My friends who decide to use blocks, you're very vigilant about making sure that you don't dip too low with your head. I'm going to take a few silent moments of meditation here. So it's a stretch in our hip and a stretch of silence. Now carefully come out. One hand on the back of the chair. We're upright with a firm belly. Point that left knee forward. Step into your mountain. Hip distance apart. I have one more little game for us to play before we make our way to the floor. And I will have to relocate my chair so that I can show you this effectively. And I will come off of my mat to show it to you effectively. Now you'll face towards your chair and shift your weight onto your right leg a little bit with your hands on the chair base, so right on the seat of the chair. Now just gently start to lift your left leg back behind you. Think of dancing a jig. Bring your left hand onto your hip and hug that right hip underneath you. So you just feel that it's what's called load bearing, weight bearing on that right hip. And you'll tuck that hip underneath you. You might go thumb to the sky. There's a lot of balance. If you look down at your chair, it could be helpful. And you can have your palm flat on the chair base. Just have fun with it. Silly good fun. Return your left hand onto your hip if you extended it to the sky. Turn that hip down, both hands on the seat of your chair. And then with your belly firm, hands on your hips, and come to standing. Mountain pose, palms turn out. I will now move my chair. You don't have to move yours. Standing in front of our chair in our mountain pose. Hands come onto the seat of our chair. There's a bend in our knees. Shift your weight onto your left foot. Begin to, I'm not being mindful of my own props. Make sure there aren't any blocks in your way. Begin to extend your right leg back behind you. And then begin to hug your left hip underneath you and consider the possibility of your right hand on your hip. So you're hugging that underneath. You just have a dancing of a jig happening in your left hip. If you enjoy it, left thumb to the sky, right arm to the sky, thumb to the sky, and then take a few moments here. Return, right hand onto your hip, right hand onto the base of your chair, square your hips off, and then feet hip distance. Hands on your hips, firm through your feet and your belly. Come upright. Return to your mat if you're me. Now let's make sure that our props are off to the side and out of our way. I believe I was not a mindful leader in that moment. Feet hip distance, inhale, arms out to the side, thumbs to the sky, V shape, and then exhale, hinge at your hips and hands to your thighs. Inhale, heart extends. Exhale, hinge at your hips. You may want to use the seat of your chair to bring yourself gently and carefully onto the ground. Once we're on the ground, that folded blanket prop is going to be a very good friend to us. So your folded throw blanket or your bath towel, and then I would say fold it so it's pretty chunky, so it's a nice bench to sit upon. You can even grab a cushion from your couch if it doesn't feel like it's a sufficient bench. Now once we've got our bench figured out, we're going to sit upon it. It could be that one of those blocks comes in handy for the next thing that we're going to do. Extend your legs out in front of you and feel that you shift the front of your sit bones so we're not sitting with a rounded spine. We're seated like we're standing in our mountain. And from our mountain, we grow a tree seated. So that could be your right foot into your left shin. It might be that you help it along carefully, right foot into left inner thigh. And this is where it might be handy to have a block underneath your right thigh. Thumbs to the sky, a V shape, we inhale. Now turn right ribs towards your left leg and then think hinge at the hips and elongation through the spine. Curl your left toes towards you and pause here in our tree that's seated on the ground. Two more moments just like this. And then firm through your feet, or your seat, pardon me, in your belly, and come upright. And then help it along, extend your right leg out in front of you. Bend your left knee and put that foot into the inner thigh, or if it works in your body, help it along so either shin or thigh. And if you'd like to use your block underneath your left thigh, great. Thumbs to the sky, a V shape as we inhale. And then left ribs rotate as if to face the right leg. And we might walk ourselves forward just a smidge, but it's a hinge at the hips. No agenda to try to get our face to our leg. Majesty of our mountain in our spine. Just a few moments here. Now slowly, firm through your belly and your seat, come all the way upright and help it along. Left leg extends out in front of you. You can give your legs a little waggle. And then bend your knees and place your feet on the ground. We're heading into lying down on our back, so you can dismount your stoop and shift that off to the side. And then make your way onto your back. Once you're lying down on your back, same thing that we did when we were standing, except we're lying down now. Cross your right ankle on top of your thigh. It can stay just like this. It might be that it feels great to you to use your block and put it underneath your left foot so that it elevates the foot a little bit and gives you a teensy bit more stretch. Maybe eventually hands around the hamstring, possibly hands around the shin. I do want the back of your head to feel heavy on the ground and your shoulders to feel like they're extending into the ground also, as opposed to rounding away from the ground. A couple moments here in what's called reclining pigeon. Then release your left foot to the ground. So if there's a block there, you can just kind of scooch it off to the side. Help your right foot to the ground, and we switch sides. So left ankle on top of right thigh. And then you decide. Perhaps the right foot now goes onto your block. Maybe you interlace around that right hamstring, possibly around the right shin, but we're not looking for a struggle and we're not looking for a fight. We want the porridge to be just right. How's that for a little rhyme for you? A couple moments here. While we're here, relax your jaw. Oh, right? Let your tongue feel like it's already in our Shavasana final meditation. You're welcome to close your eyes. Just 2 more moments here. Awareness as we dismount. Foot onto the block or not, and then right foot onto the ground. Help your left foot onto the ground if you had a block in the mix. Do better than I did earlier and move your props mindfully off to the side. And then snuggle your shoulder blades underneath you and step your feet as wide as your mat. Let your knees fall towards one another, and then gently lift your hips up just an inch. Feel like your tailbone is elongating to the bottom edge of your mat, and then release your hips to your mat with so much space in your low back. And decide if maybe it feels good to just stay here in constructive rest with your knees knocking together. Or option to extend one leg and then the other leg straight onto the floor with your feet flopping open. Close your eyes, maybe cover your eyes. Our final meditation, Shavasana. As always, you're welcome to, and in fact encouraged to, stay here in Shavasana as long as you'd like. If you're ready to find your way back, move your fingers and toes. Could be a stretch in opposite directions, hits the spot. And then gather your knees into your chest and roll to either side. Let your head be the last thing to come up. You can pull your perch back in to sit on if you'd like. Place your palms up or down and just take a moment. You danced a jig, you grew a tree, you've moved your hips in ways that they don't get to move every day for some freedom. decide to take this freedom with you off your mat and into your life. I'm Andrea. Thank you so much for practicing with me. I look forward to us doing it again together soon.